When I use the words assault rifle, do you imagine one of these? Well, what about one of these? Or maybe one of these? Hey everyone, today I'm going to be doing a video talking about a ballot measure that's going on right now in the state of Washington. And that ballot measure would in effect turn this Ruger 1022 into an assault rifle. Now, as of the time of making this video, I know some ballots are already out there, so I'm sure some of you who are watching this have either voted already yes or no on that ballot measure. However, I'm assuming that if you've already filled it out by now, you probably knew what you were going to do, and my video is probably not going to change your mind. So hopefully with this video, I can reach those of you who are still on the fence and help you at least understand my reasons why I think it would benefit everyone in the state of Washington to vote no on 1639. Now, I should say right off the bat, I do not live in Washington. I'm not a Washington resident. I, in fact, live in Oregon, so I call the Pacific Northwest my home. And while I may not be a resident of Washington, I still feel connected to the fellow gun owners up there and want to make sure that they are not limited in their rights as American citizens. Now, in this video, I'm not going to be addressing 1639 in its entirety. That would just make for way too long of a video. So instead, I'm going to be focusing on certain aspects of the ballot measure that I find the most concerning, and I'm going to be trying to do my best to use actual factual evidence to back up my beliefs, and I'm going to be listing all the references I'm using in the description down below or in the description of the Facebook post so that you guys who are watching this video don't have to take my word for it. You can look at this information for yourself, and that's going to include the entirety of the bill itself, because I think this is one of those bills where it would be beneficial for you to actually read the text of the bill in its entirety. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump right into the ballot initiative. Now, I have some notes here in front of me where I've taken exact text from the bill just so I have the exact verbiage in front of me, as well as some of my sources, which are going to include the Council on Foreign Relations and the FBI. So right off the bat, I want to point out in the Section 1 of the ballot measure, when it is listing the intent of the bill, it immediately starts out with an appeal to emotion and I think some logical fallacies and some inaccuracies. So I'm going to go ahead and address those right off the bat. So the text, and I'm quoting directly here, says, "Gun violence is far too common in Washington and the United States. In particular, shootings involving the use of semi-automatic assault rifles have resulted in hundreds of lives lost, devastating injuries, and lasting psychological impacts on survivors, their families, and communities." So, does the claim that the use of semi-automatic assault rifles poses an imminent threat to residents of Washington or the United States as a whole hold water? Is that claim factual? So, what I went ahead and did is I went to the FBI crime statistics. If you're not aware of it, the FBI does an amazing job of basically accumulating all the information on different crimes all across the United States and putting it basically out there for reference for people like myself to use in a video such as this. They list statistics by murder weapon. Now, these numbers are going to be from 2014 because that's some of the most recent information available. So obviously this is not going to take into account some of the more recent activities. However, I think as you'll see in these numbers, even if you were to include some of these mass events that have happened recently, my point will still stand. So here's what I want to point out. It lists the total murders by weapon, and it includes, one of the statistics is rifles. So as far as we can tell, by listing rifles, it's not only referring to semi-automatic, what they would call assault rifles, but all rifles as a whole. And that number, at least again for 2014, was 248 people murdered with rifles. Again, that's all rifles, not just semi-automatic assault rifles. Now, to put that number into context, I want to read off some of the other murder weapons on this list. So, if we are looking at knives or cutting instruments, i.e. someone being stabbed to death, that number jumps up to 1,567. So you are almost 6 times more likely to be killed with a knife than you are by a rifle in the United States. So, okay, maybe some of you already knew that. Let's go down to the next topic, which is blunt objects, i.e. clubs, hammers, baseball bats, etc. That number is 435. So you are almost twice as likely to be killed by a hammer, baseball bat, etc. than you are by a rifle in the United States of America. But if we go down even one more line number here, we have personal weapons, i.e. hands, fists, feet, etc. That jumps up to 660, which means you are about 3 times more likely to be killed by someone's own hands or feet than you are by a rifle in the United States of America. So using the statistics here from the FBI, which again I will have linked below so you can look at the numbers yourself, rifles are not the menace to society that the people who wrote this ballot measure would lead you to believe. I also think it's important to think about the ramifications of even using that terminology of assault rifles and what the definition of an assault rifle would be. Again, as I showed at the beginning of this video, this is a Ruger 1022, which shoots a 22 long rifle round. And just for reference, I know a lot of people who are not super familiar with guns may not understand different caliber sizes in relation to each other. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to demonstrate side by side what a 1022 fires next to a AR-15, a traditional scary gun as the media would lead you to believe, next to a .308 Winchester, which is an extremely popular hunting round here in the United States. And if you look at those side by side, you will realize, I think, how insane it is to consider a training rifle or recreational rifle like this 1022 as an assault rifle. The definition is completely asinine and drastically limits what people in Washington have access to, especially those under the age of 21, which we'll get to in a second. The next point that I'm going to bring up in this ballot measure I think is one of the most concerning, and that is referencing Section 5, which is secure gun storage. Basically, what this ballot measure would do is completely redefine what safe gun storage could possibly be in the state of Washington and really adjust the ramifications of a gun owner who is found to not have stored their firearms securely, although the definition of securely, I think, as you'll see, is pretty vague. So again, I would refer you to the actual text of the ballot measure itself because this section is pretty long and wordy, so I'm going to try to simplify it as best I can. But basically, a person who stores it or leaves a firearm in a location where that person knows or reasonably should know that a prohibited person may gain access to the firearm is guilty of community endangerment due to unsafe storage of a firearm in the first degree, etc., etc. Basically, you are going to be criminally liable if your firearm is not secured properly. However, I think the most important thing to point out in this section, in number 6 here, nothing in this section mandates how or where a firearm must be stored. So, my assessment of that statement in of itself is, we don't know what constitutes safe storage. We're not going to define what safe storage is. So that is going to be completely left up to the judge who oversees this case, which means who is to say what safe storage is now as this bill is being proposed? Does that mean if you lock your house and keep your guns loose in your house, as long as your front door is locked, that's safe storage? Does that mean each individual firearm has to have a trigger lock in addition to being in a safe? We simply don't know. Again, this section is so vaguely worded that it leaves a lot of gray area that should not exist when we're talking about something like firearms, something protected in the Bill of Rights. One of the other things that's important about this is how is something like this going to be enforced? Theoretically, again, because this section is so vague, you could theoretically be opening yourself up as if you are a legal gun owner in the state of Washington. For all you know, and for all we know with, again, how this is written, you are giving blanket license to law enforcement to at any point in time search your property to ensure that your firearms are being securely stored. Again, what that means we don't know, but you are opening yourself up to the possibility of law enforcement officers at any point in time deciding that they are going to inspect your home and giving them access inside of your home. Again, that is another thing that we have protected under the Bill of Rights that this would violate. Moving on to Section 7, we come to another really concerning aspect of this ballot measure. And again, to quote it here, a signed application to purchase a pistol or semi-automatic assault rifle shall constitute a waiver of confidentiality and written request that the healthcare authority, mental health institutions, and other healthcare facilities release to an inquiring court or law enforcement agency information relevant to the application's eligibility to purchase a pistol or semi-automatic assault rifle to an inquiring court, law enforcement agency, etc. It goes on. Again, one of the things that I think you should read in its entirety. Essentially what that's saying is if you want to purchase a pistol or semi-automatic assault rifle in the state of Washington, you are waiving your healthcare privacy. You are essentially, by signing that form, waiving your right to medical privacy. You are opening yourself up so that whoever is overseeing your application for a firearm can now look at your entire medical history. And again, I think that sets a very dangerous precedent and leaves something like that way too open to abuse by people in law enforcement or other government agencies. And full disclosure, I'm not necessarily against things like mental health records being available for background checks of firearms. I'm not going to say that. However, the way this is written and the way this is worded leaves it far too open to abuse, in my opinion. So now I want to talk about Section 13 of this ballot measure, which reads, a person under 21 years of age may not purchase a pistol or semi-automatic rifle. Now, to be clear, again, for those of you who may not be familiar with gun laws in the United States, according to federal law, people under age 21 are not able to purchase pistols. However, people 18 and over can purchase long guns, to include things like AR-15s. But this would again limit 18-year-olds from purchasing things like this, a Ruger 1022. This just happens to be the first new production rifle that I purchased after turning 18, and I think this is one of the best choices for people who are looking to get into shooting recreationally and want to learn and practice on something that's going to be inexpensive, easy to shoot, and very inviting to people who may be recoil or noise sensitive with firearms. So we're taking away a safe route for people to learn and familiarize themselves with firearms, and instead reducing their access to those tools in order to become safe and more responsible gun owners. And on top of that, for example, you have in Washington, Joint Base Lewis McChord, which is just south of Seattle. Now, with that, I think it's very important to point out something about our United States military. And these numbers come from the Council on Foreign Relations. These numbers came out earlier this year in 2018. And unfortunately, the way they block the age demographics of our military, they have 17 to 19 and then 20 to 24. However, having been in the military myself, I feel very comfortable in saying that the 20 to 24 skews largely on that younger end from 20 to 21. So using those numbers, we can see that a huge percentage of our enlisted forces in the United States of America, whether we're talking Army, Navy, Marines, or Air Force, is made up of people under the age of 21. So what that means is some soldier stationed at Joint Base Lewis McChord can be issued a 240 Bravo, which is, for those of you not familiar with it, is a fully automatic 308 rifle. They can be issued one of those to defend our country, but as soon as they step off that base into their own home, they are no longer allowed to even hold a Ruger 1022 in their possession. Now, just think about how insane that sounds. We are trusting these young men and women to go overseas and protect our rights and freedoms as Americans, and yet when they come home or when they get off their shift and they go to their own personal residence, they cannot even have the civilian facsimile of the rifles that they're issued in combat. Because again, this AR-15 is a rifle that has never been used in combat. The United States military has never issued an AR-15 to any military personnel. Meanwhile, that same individual can go purchase an old military surplus Mosin Nagant, Mauser, Enfield, tools that have actually actively been used in war, but we don't care about that because they don't look as scary as this AR-15. Again, in my opinion, completely asinine rules and lines in the sand to draw. So obviously I was able to very briefly touch over some of the certain aspects of this ballot measure. Once again, I'm going to say I would encourage you to read it in its entirety so that you can be as informed as possible before casting your vote in the state of Washington. But I'm going to take this opportunity now to kind of wrap up my thoughts on this topic. And before doing so, I want to point out, I would apologize for the sound of gunshots in the background here at this gun range. However, that is the sound of freedom and a sound that I think every American should enjoy. So I want to reiterate again, when you look at Section 1, which lays out the intent of this bill, there's a lot of appeals to emotion, there's a lot of buzzwords like common sense, assault rifles, words that are used specifically to make you more likely to listen to what they have to say and not necessarily care about the actual facts. Again, using those FBI crime statistics, that rifles are far less likely to be used in a murder than things such as knives, baseball bats, or someone's own hands. So why would they be going after rifles when those really aren't the problem? And in my opinion, if you were to ask me, which by clicking on this video, I'm assuming you did, it's because they are the easy target right now. The media has done a very good job of making people fear the silhouette of an AR-15 or AK-47, things that are legal to own by civilians in the United States. They are doing their absolute best to make you fear these so that they can further legislate your rights away. And because people already fear these, they think that these are the easiest target because these are the things that in a lot of people's minds who are not familiar with them seem to be the least necessary thing for someone to own. And for that reasoning specifically, there's one thing that I really want you to ask yourself once this video is over. And that is, what comes next? What comes after this bill? Because I can guarantee, I would put money on it right now, that this bill, if passed, will not accomplish the goals that they set out in the intent of this bill. It will fail because these are not the problem. This is an easy solution that will not actually fix the problem. So what happens when people are still killed in the United States? Are they going to say, well, that didn't work, so we'll give you back those rights? Absolutely not. All they're going to do is come after the next thing, and the next thing, and the next thing, until we are left completely unable to defend ourselves. You can look at the history of gun control in other countries, and it never is enough. It's always a little bit more, and a little bit more, and a little bit more, until there's an outright gun ban or confiscation. And the thing that I will never cease to find tragically funny, I guess, is the fact that the people who seem to trust our government the least right now are the ones that want to put them with the most power by taking the arms away from law-abiding citizens and putting all of that power into our federal government. So with that, I would definitely encourage you to have a discussion in the comments of this video, hopefully as peacefully as possible. I know there's going to be very strong opinions on both sides of this debate, so try to do your best to hear the other person and not just yell at each other. And I would also encourage you, I'm going to do my best to make this as shareable as possible, so if you agree with me, or even if you don't agree with me and you want other people to hear what I have to say, definitely do your best to share this around so that as many people can hear this message as possible, whether it be on Facebook, on YouTube, or any other social media platform like that. So on that note, as always, I hope you got something out of this video, and I really appreciate you watching.